Hello,
Hey.
everybody. Nagila
Hi.
and Shari, as you know, and we are joined by our special guest, which we've already mentioned in a previous video. Um, but how do we even start saying what we've been working on?
Yeah, well, we had also posted the last few days about on our Combined Impact Instagram story, we have a new collaboration coming up with Miss Gyonne and TENT Rotterdam. And I think Gionna will give a short description of what TENT is and herself, of course, in a bit. But just in short, we have been working on a collaboration the last few months, which is coming up. It's called the Project. Wait, I'm sorry.
A
I,
tapestry of a diaspora. It's fine.
I I was thinking of Project Diaspora, and then I was like, I almost said that, and that was your previous project. But yes, so a history of a diaspora, which is the project we're really excited to launch. But first, let's start with Gianna. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. So my name is Gyonne Goedhoop, and I work as a program maker at TENT Rotterdam for about 3 years already. So time really flies. And like Shadi already kind of mentioned, last year I worked with Project Diaspora, which is like the baby of Simona Sevek and Richard Kofi, who have a podcast. And this year I wanted to work with another awesome duo. And that's where I came to Combined Impact. And as a program maker, I think for me, generally, not only at 10, but how I like to um, view my collaborations and the concepts that I make, it's very important for me to focus on like decentering the voices in that sense of institutes or decentering voices that in most of the time already have a lot of platform or people who know how to find it, and I would like to use those kinds of spaces to give grassroots collectives like Combined Impact or Project Diaspora, but we can talk about a lot of different types of grassroots initiatives and uh, not collections, different
Collectives?
no, I wanted to say platforms. Yeah, exactly. Um, to give them space. And so that's kind of what I do and how I do it. And I think most of my concepts center around humanness and what it means for people in a diaspora to be close to themselves and what it means to kind of survive also or live in urban spaces, but all kinds of different spaces that aren't specifically don't cater to their presence. And that can mean a lot of different things, but I think what is the most important thing to mention is that this time we'll be talking about what it means to be resilient and like those life for me life strategies that a lot of people from different diaspora with strong migration backgrounds um, don't really think about, that they are constantly surviving or having to be strong, whatever that means, or resilient, and what price we pay for that actually, and maybe a literal price because it's also connected to the capitalistic world we live in, but also obviously a mental and for me also a spiritual price we pay for that. And I thought that that would be interesting to kind of um, research, but with the voices that in a way go through that every day. And obviously we can't talk for everyone, and there are very a lot of different intersections, and it's not a binary approach of black and white, but it's to give a platform or give a voice about these kinds of things that I find we don't talk about enough. um, and I'd like to kind of, before Ila and Shadi, y'all can say what you think about that, but like what resiliency or being resilient means to me is actually um in a way is having to be resilient meant for me, especially moving to the Netherlands from the Caribbean. It's actually it meant for me to kind of silently um suffer in a way, or silently not being able to voice what was really going on, because I had to constantly go and study and see how I could make money or think about the future, everything simultaneously at this, like at the same time, which didn't
Yeah.
really give me mental or spiritual or economic space to really enjoy my time, in my case as a student, for example. Not even talking about the cultural differences in the Netherlands, or the fact that yes, I speak Dutch, but the way we use Dutch here on the island is a different kind of cultural um, expression than obviously people who speak Dutch in the Netherlands. So those are just a few factors that really made me think about what it meant for me to be resilient, and that it's also a new strategy for myself to be like, yeah, I'm not gonna do things anymore that cost me my peace.
Yeah.
So kind of rewriting what resiliency means for me, and in that sense it means rest and letting things come to me for a change, or that I don't always have to be the one, um, because I'm also
Chasing.
privileged to
Yeah.
do that now, um, to not
Mm,
always
yeah.
be the one needing to run for things, and also realizing that that is a privilege in and of itself. So I hope we can talk about that with the other collectives that we're going to collaborate with, like Beyond Walls, also Kunu by Ones Landveld, just to name a few, that we can talk about those different dynamics of needing to be resilient, because like I said, it's not really like a binary approach. But Ila, Shari, maybe y'all can talk about what being resilient has meant for you, because maybe it changed.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely relate to the whole idea of that toxic, like I view it as a toxic way of viewing resiliency in the past, where we're like juggling so many things at once, and we're almost like forced to be resilient, as you say. You move here to a new country, you don't know anyone, you all of a sudden are put in a position that you have to basically take care of yourself,
Mm,
by yourself, like feed yourself, learn a whole new language, a whole new culture, but also making sure you don't fail at school, because that's what you're here for. And a lot of us, for example, receiving funding for that, and you have to keep going to school, otherwise you don't have the funding. So it's that constant, like, you're basically trapped from the minute you get here, I think, and that's a vicious circle.
mm,
And like, I remember thinking people really like praising you for being resilient, but when you really were looking at what they were praising you for, it's just basically like working yourself to death in a way,
mm,
just so, because you need to, because you don't have a choice, because you need to survive. And that's like, I think what I started realizing, it was like being in a constant survival state, which wasn't healthy. But it is in a way praised, and also back in our culture, in our community, because it's oftentimes the only thing we know, and the only way to move forward and survive. And so I started really thinking about, or like one thing I like keeps popping up is like, at some point I'm like, but I don't want to be resilient. I just want to breathe. Why do I have to be
I
like?
just
Why
want
do
to
I
chill.
have to? Why is this such a bad thing that I don't want to like keep fighting? I just want to breathe. Why is that such a thing to be shamed for, or such a thing that we look down on? Like taking a step back, and reassessing things, and looking at your life like, is this really what I want? Or like you said, like changing the narrative to, no, it's time to take care of myself, my body, my mind, before I do anything else. And I think that's like the part of yeah, that aspect of that toxic mindset of what I thought was resiliency, that I had to let go of, and then slowly it started to shift. I think I can relate to what you said with, it's shifting and making it, or getting, just like changing the meaning of it for myself, and what it actually means to be resilient, or actually means to be strong. It's not that you're constantly going at 100, but it's you know when it's time to take a step back and breathe and be like, okay, this is not healthy for me. What do I need to do differently? And those type of things. And it's a very tricky, yeah, it's a very tricky thing, because especially us coming from different diasporas, we are forced to do that because we don't have a choice. and not having that choice, kind of like, it's hard. And I think that's something a lot of us don't realize exactly how hard or how tough it is what we go through, because we internalize it as normal. I think we internalize a lot of things as normal because we don't have a choice. But when you really look at it, it's kind of unhealthy to say the least.
Yeah,
But
it's unfair too.
it's also very unfair. But we don't often like to think about how unfair and it is, because it sucks,
And I,
especially if when
yeah,
hmm?
like no, I wanted to add a little bit in the sense that it's also, I think, important for us to realize like the intergenerational social mobility that we did gain without um without forgetting that it's still toxic for us too. So maybe our parents didn't have the access to be able to do what we're doing, but that doesn't mean that we just need to keep going and not assess the toxic traits that we or
Yeah.
dynamics that we still, yeah, perpetuate or still are in.
Yeah.
I think that's important to also mention in that.
It feels like a slightly toxic relationship, the way that we are acting at the moment, because we've been told already that we will be experiencing certain things, but we haven't been told how tiring it can be. Because when you're a kid, because what, we were 17, 18, 19, the time that we
Baby.
come here, and by the time that we're that age and coming to the Netherlands, all we've been doing our entire lives is learn, 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 um, be, faced with challenges constantly, and then you rise up to those challenges, and apparently, because that's how we get to come here. And
Yeah.
so we've been practicing, but that's the normal practice that everybody's been doing. Everybody that pursues higher education does that kind of practice, and when we get here, we continue what we've been doing. We continue rising up to challenges, except we don't necessarily realize how disproportionate the amount of challenges that we have to deal with is compared to people who get to only rise up to educational challenges. So all they have to do is learn new concepts, just like we've been doing all our lives. But we have to do that in our third language, and also have to deal with a completely different society, not being around our families, our support system, not having all of the resources that we've always had. So we start basically from scratch, having to do everything that everybody else is doing, plus a lot more. And it's because we've been practicing for so long, and because we've been in that survival mode for so long, that we don't necessarily notice how much it is until we reach a certain point and look back and we're like, wow, we've been fighting this uphill battle this entire fucking time. And instead of helping us or instead of giving us tools, people are just praising us, and they're just saying, oh, wow, you're doing such a good job. It's so amazing
Brilliant.
doing. Like, yeah, but help me. Like, give me tools, give me spaces so I can feel safe, or I can feel at home, or where I can be with my people. So we are resilient. That's true. If we decide to take a break at a certain point, we can't expect the rest of the world or the people around us to also slow down, so we don't get left behind. So we have to take that into account as well. We either have to keep going or be left behind. Um,
Yeah.
we internalize that somehow. We make it part of our personalities. We say, yeah, we are very strong women. We can do all of this, but better in our third language. We're really proud of it. Of course, we're proud because we do get to prove that we can do that stuff. But it's the fact that we're expected to, or that we have to, otherwise we get left behind. That's the part that doesn't really sit well with me and a lot of other people. So yeah,
Hmm.
resilience has two sides. Of course, a positive side, it made us stronger people, but the reason why is
And
kind of questionable.
I'm thinking while I'm hearing both of you talk, like so many things that I also like agree with, as in that's also the experience that I feel, and that I'm realizing also how for diasporic people or people with strong migration backgrounds, being resilient is also oftentimes, or maybe most of the time, very much intertwined with like colonialities or
Yeah.
geopolitical worldly
Mm-hmm.
global problems, and also realizing like us three coming from the Caribbean and being having access to a specific uh, class or
Mm-hmm.
rising up in that social mobility, because I
Yeah.
cannot talk for all of us or anyone who will join this conversation, but realizing that like my parents came from another country to where we're from in the Caribbean, and me having the opportunity to go to the Netherlands, which is a different kind of social mobility.
Yeah.
But like, it's very funny. This morning I had a conversation with my parents about this. Isn't it kind of like, if you really think about it, it boggles my mind that us three, we came to the Netherlands to study, but we most of the people who walk the same path as we do are from kind of the same classes as we are. Start up with a huge amount of debt. So you
No.
know, like, indeed, what I think Shadi said, that like being able to do this and not getting the tools. That's what Ila said also, but not like realizing that the economical part of needing to be resilient and working extra hard, because if you fail or you don't finish your university or hobby or whatever, your school, whatever, then you not only not have a diploma, but you have a huge amount of debt that you
It costs you
don't
money
know how you will pay that back.
Yeah.
So that is,
slowly.
yeah, that's something I wanted to mention because I realized it even more while we're talking about it just
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
But a funny part is also like when the part where the first time in my life that I realized that the world will not try to help was when unfortunately my father passed away, and obviously I didn't continue my studies that year. I had to, in the state that I was in, I had to go and find the help that I needed. And finally, after just being resilient and sucking up my grief and finding that help that I needed, people started to like, okay, there are procedures. This is what you have to do. You don't necessarily have to go to school, of course. We totally understand. But I do get to keep getting duo, but that means that I still have to keep, at a certain point in my life, I'll have to pay back that money at the
Yeah.
time that I was grieving. And it's not something that I chose. Of course, technically speaking, I chose to stop my studies so I can grieve instead.
But
But
it's
all of that time, I was just racking up debt and more debt, and like,
Like, these
I'm,
systems don't allow us, not just us people in general, but if we keep it at us, people with
mm,
strong migration backgrounds or diasporic people, it takes away the humanness. Like, you needed to
yeah.
grieve and you needed to pay, in a sense, for
Mm,
you
yeah.
being able to do that.
it was costing me money, and I was constantly thinking, wow, this means that I have studievertraging, or that I have study delays, and so I'm gonna have to do the year over again. That's gonna be 2,000 extra euros, only for university, but also the rent that I'm paying. I was eating less, or I was eating cheaper foods just to make
Yeah.
it not be that expensive. So that's when I was like, wow, okay, so there are people there for moral support, my friends, but this is costing me money. And it's that then I was like, okay, fine. I guess I have to schedule in time to be, I guess, not financially prosperous. Or it was a
Yeah.
tough lesson to learn, but resilience and just keep going is
Yeah.
something we have to do.
It's so interesting that, like, when you speak of like all of the different, I can bet every single one of us, every single one of our friends, everyone we know here that studies has their own hacks, their own tools, their own
Mhm.
stories, and their own ways that they figured out how to make a 20 euro bills stretch at least 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Like, I cannot even begin to explain all of the hacks, all of the things that, all of the different ways I found to like feed myself when there was no money,
Yeah.
and it's baffling really when you look at it, how good we are at that,
At being
and why we
resilient.
have to become good at that,
Yeah.
and it's wild to when you really sit and think about it, how a whole like generation of like people here, like all of the different ways that we had like to get creative just to survive.
Yeah.
And it's really sad that, like what you said, it's like it costs you money to slow
take a
down, to
break.
stop, to
Yeah.
take a break, to breathe, to grieve, to deal with all the things you do. And then as soon as you do, you're done for in a way.
Yeah, you're
Because
left behind.
yeah,
People like all of my classmates, obviously, like nobody's gonna stop their studies to wait for somebody else, but
but
everybody else as well. When I had to redo the papers that I had to do, when I had to redo tests, all of that stuff, people just, even though I explained to them in the email why I'm going to have to redo it, they just completely forgot. Nobody really cares, and it's sure
there's
it's
no
fine, but
yeah,
there are different times that all of us had to be resilient, either in a low grade way or it just a survival type of way. And that's why with the podcast episodes that we'll be recording, they'll of course be released where we usually release our podcasts, and those are already planned with invited people. But besides the official recorded sessions
mhm,
of the podcast episodes, we're also going to have talks at the kitchen table, and these will be informal talks. We already mentioned that in the previous video, but those we're going to invite different people from the diaspora. It's not going to be recorded, so nobody has to you know be afraid that it's going to be out there for everybody to hear. It's just talk in a safe space, talk to other people about what it was like to have to be resilient, to not have a choice, or how did you manage to still, to still keep being you, keep being okay. Take the time for yourself. How are you dealing with the huge burden of death and everything else that comes with having to be resilient and living in a different country than where you or your family is from?
yeah.
So
And I
yeah,
think
that's what we've invited people for.
yeah, and I think also most importantly, how do we rewrite it? How do we
Yeah. How do
change
we?
the narrative in a way?
Yeah,
Like, how do we move forward from this and no longer like basically enable it? I feel,
I,
you know?
hmm
yeah, I also feel like indeed, for me, it's really important to regenerate certain spaces because at the end of the day, it's good to talk about things that we wish and that we work hard on it, but we're also in this day, like in this moment, in these moments, we are in spaces that inherently weren't made for our voices. So how do we regenerate those spaces? And I think for me personally, working on these talks with y'all and the other people we're going to collaborate with, that's an interesting question for me. Like, how do we, I don't per se like to use the word claim because yes, we claim spaces in a sense because our presence is there, but we need to regenerate the whole space, not just like for me personally in okay, I'm there and this is what we're gonna do. No, the whole coding of that space needs to change. Like us being there, having those types of conversations. What does that mean? You know, how can we change the way we use specific spaces? Like that is why I
Mhm.
often in the programs that I make and also in this one, and that's why I called it at the kitchen table. Sitting at a kitchen table for me means that it's
hmm
safe and that we can eat maybe or drink
yeah,
tea or I don't know, something we like and feel safe with each other and open. So
Come pambuyo. Ah.
exactly, or funchi or whatever, like
Um,
um
yeah, just that
generation.
safeness, that feeling of just yeah, home, and that feeling of being able to discuss the days, like how did your day go, how was the
yeah,
yeah, it's just it's a unique type of feeling, I think. And me personally, we you see that we like, yeah, everywhere we go, we try to emulate that same type of feeling, I feel, in a way. And it's so important. It's so important to create those safe spaces for ourselves, I believe, as well. Like, I'm no longer in that state of mind that I'm begging other people to create them for me. It's that you can't wait for that, I think, in a way, especially us coming from our diaspora and our culture. I feel like it's now time for us to not reclaim, but to create our own spaces and to, yeah, push our own way through.
Yeah.
So
I think we can talk about this like for hours, but I think for now,
We have to leave some stuff for the podcast.
yeah, right.
yeah.
So we have 3 conversations at like that are informal, which we call at the kitchen table. So those will be at the 27th of February, which is, if you see this today, the next week Saturday from 7 till 8. Then we have the second edition of another informal talk on the 27th of March. And then we have the same version with different people, hopefully on the 24th of April. And because of COVID and the different regulations, we will be keeping everyone who's interested up to date on when we will do the live podcast recordings. And we hope to have some people in the room so we can have that dynamic going. The difference with those episodes is that they are episodes, so they will be recorded. That will begin in the spring. And we will be working with different grassroots collectives from different diasporas. So, like Beyond Walls really focuses on the Indonesian diaspora, which is already a very big diaspora. So, being critical about that, we will be talking and working with a lot of the different diasporas that we see in Rotterdam, especially. So we will be hoping to work with people who focus on the Moroccan diaspora, Cape Verdean, etc. Just like the bigger migrative groups. So we will be keeping everyone up to date about that. But yeah, I hope to see everyone there, obviously, at all of the episodes. But to begin with the first 3 informal talks, that will be great. I think they can find the information in the post on my personal Instagram page, on y'all's Twitter, on
our
my,
personal Instagram
yeah,
page. In fact,
the
all the
information
platforms,
out
all
there.
of the profiles.
And of course,
So
we're always a DM away as well.
yeah,
So for information, you can always DM and ask. We'll always be available.
yeah.
Mhm.
Y'all want to add something? I'm good for now.
I'm good. I'm excited. I'm ready to go. I'm
Yeah.
ready to do this.
We can
I'm
finally
ready.
talk about it.
Yeah, I'm so happy.
Yeah,
So,
like me and Ela were talking about, or like with another friend of ours yesterday. It's like, we always sit, especially with our podcast, we're like always like, yeah, we need to start these conversations, yeah, and now we're finally like actually doing it,
Yeah.
So it's like time to put our money where our mouth is, or whatever, however that saying goes. But
Yeah, I guess.
I'm
you
happy
get what I
to
meant.
contribute.
But
So I'm happy about that. So everyone tuning
Thanks.
in, you can find the information, rewind this recording, or just like check it out on our socials.
Yeah.
And I hope
yes,
we will be seeing you all. Please do sign up because space is limited. Also the sessions online,
mhm,
and obviously also the ones who will be recorded live. So please do sign
yeah,
up or DM us or send a message if you're interested. So yeah,
yes.
I'm gonna say goodbye.
Yeah. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.